There comes a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable at first, when the conversations around you start to feel smaller than your thoughts. Not because you've become superior, but because something inside you has shifted. The jokes don't land the same. The ambitions feel repetitive. The noise, louder than it used to be. And what's unsettling isn't that others have changed. It's that you have. And if you've ever sat in a room full of people, yet felt strangely alone, as if you no longer belong to the version of life everyone else is still playing, then this is the moment no one prepares you for. The moment you outgrow everyone around you. Most people misunderstand this experience. They think growth is loud, visible, celebrated. But real psychological growth is deeply isolating. Because the moment your inner world expands, your external world begins to feel misaligned. You start noticing patterns you once ignored. The need for approval in every conversation. The subtle competition hidden beneath friendships. The unconscious fear driving people to stay the same. And suddenly, what once felt like connection, begins to feel like performance. This is where the tension begins. Because while the world tells you to stay connected, to belong, to fit in, something deeper inside you is pulling you away. Not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. Modern culture confuses proximity with connection. Just because you've known someone for years, doesn't mean you're still aligned. Just because people accept you, doesn't mean they understand you. And just because you feel lonely, doesn't mean you're lost. In fact, loneliness at this stage is often a signal, not of absence, but of transition. We live in a world that rewards sameness. Where people are subtly conditioned to think alike, act alike, dream alike. Because sameness is safe. It maintains the structure. But growth, real growth, disrupts that structure. And the moment you begin to think independently, to question inherited beliefs, to seek something deeper than surface-level validation, you become difficult to categorize. Difficult to predict. And often, difficult to relate to. This is why many people stop growing. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they fear the cost. Because growth demands separation. Not always physically, but psychologically. Carl Jung once said, individuation is the process of becoming aware of oneself as a unique individual. But what he didn't emphasize enough, is how lonely that process can feel. Because individuation means breaking away from the collective identity. It means stepping outside the roles you were unconsciously assigned. The good friend. The agreeable one. The person who fits in. And when you stop playing these roles, people notice. Not always consciously, but they feel it. The dynamic changes. You speak less, but mean more. You observe more, but react less. You no longer seek validation, which unsettles those who still depend on it. And this is where the first shift happens. The shift from belonging, to becoming. At first, it feels like loss. You start withdrawing, not intentionally, but naturally. You don't resonate with the same conversations. You don't find comfort in the same distractions. You begin valuing silence over noise. And slowly, distance forms. Not because you rejected others, but because you no longer abandon yourself to stay connected. This is the first stage. Awareness. The moment you realize, you're no longer who you used to be. And this awareness is both liberating and painful. Because once you see clearly, you can't go back to unconscious living. You can't unsee the patterns. You can't unknow the truth. And most importantly, you can't shrink yourself, just to maintain comfort. This leads to the second stage. Disconnection. This is where it becomes real. You sit in familiar places, with familiar people, and feel unfamiliar inside. You laugh, but it feels delayed. You speak, but it feels filtered. You exist, but not fully. There's a subtle sense of being out of sync. Like you're watching life from a slight distance. This is often mistaken for depression, or confusion. But it's something deeper. It's psychological separation. A necessary phase where your inner world detaches from your external environment. Friedrich Nietzsche captured this perfectly: one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. Because before you become something new, you must first lose what you were. And loss, even when necessary, still feels like loss. This is where many people turn back. They return to old patterns, old environments, old versions of themselves. Not because they want to, but because the unknown feels heavier than the familiar. But if you stay, if you endure this phase without escaping, something begins to change. You enter the third stage. Self-reconstruction. This is where you stop defining yourself through others. You begin asking deeper questions. What do I actually value, when no one is watching? What kind of life feels true, not just acceptable? Who am I, beyond roles and expectations? And slowly, something powerful emerges. Clarity. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself. You no longer chase understanding. Because you begin to understand yourself. Viktor Frankl once wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." And that's exactly what happens here. You stop trying to fix the external world. And start refining your internal one. Your standards rise. Not in a superficial way, but in a grounded, silent way. You value depth over attention. Meaning over approval. Truth over comfort. And with that, your presence changes. You don't demand respect. But it becomes difficult to ignore you. Because there's a certain stillness in people who have faced themselves. A certain gravity. This leads to the final stage. Integration. This is where you no longer feel superior, or inferior. Just separate. Not in isolation, but in clarity. You can be around people, without needing them to be different. You can engage, without losing yourself. You can connect, without compromising your identity. This is maturity. Not perfection, but wholeness. Carl Jung described this as integrating the shadow. The parts of yourself you once ignored, rejected, or feared. Because true growth isn't about becoming better. It's about becoming whole. And wholeness changes everything. You stop chasing people. Because you're no longer trying to fill something missing. You stop forcing connections. Because you trust alignment. You stop explaining your path. Because you've accepted it. There's a quiet confidence in this stage. Not the kind that seeks attention. But the kind that doesn't need it. And this is where attraction transforms. Not just in relationships, but in life. Because people don't respond to effort. They respond to presence. And presence comes from alignment. From knowing who you are, and not negotiating it. There's a moment, often late at night, when this realization fully lands. You're alone. No distractions. No noise. Just you, and your thoughts. And for the first time, you don't feel the urge to escape yourself. There's no need to reach for your phone. No need to fill the silence. Just a quiet understanding. That even if no one around you fully sees you, you see yourself. And that's enough. Another moment comes, in a group setting. You're there physically, but mentally aware. You notice the patterns. The need for validation. The repetition. The subtle insecurity beneath confidence. And instead of feeling judgment, you feel distance. Not cold, not harsh. Just clear. And in that clarity, you realize something important. You haven't outgrown people. You've outgrown the version of yourself that needed them to stay the same. This is the truth most people never articulate. Outgrowing others isn't about leaving them behind. It's about no longer leaving yourself behind. And that shift changes everything. Because from that moment on, you don't chase belonging. You create alignment. You don't seek approval. You embody truth. You don't force connection. You allow resonance. And life begins to reorganize around who you've become. Not instantly, but inevitably. Some people will drift away. Not because of conflict, but because of contrast. And others will find you. Not because you searched, but because you aligned. This is the paradox of growth. The more you become yourself, the less you fit in. But the more you truly connect. And in the end, that's what this moment is really about. Not isolation, but transformation. Not loss, but evolution. So if you find yourself in this space, where everything familiar feels slightly distant, and everything ahead feels uncertain, understand this. You're not lost. You're transitioning. You're not alone. You're awakening. And most importantly, you're not outgrowing people. You're growing into yourself. And that requires space. So don't rush to fill it. Don't shrink to escape it. Stand in it. Because on the other side of that space is a version of you that doesn't chase, doesn't force, doesn't perform. A version of you that simply is. And that is where everything changes. If this resonated with you, subscribe, share it with someone who might be going through the same shift, and come back when you're ready for the next step.